Hey everybody, welcome back into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. This is the Practice Report. It's brought to you by Buyers Auto. That's Spencer, Holbrook, Tim May, Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward, and running out of practices. One more out of the way. The Buckeyes went on Friday morning, and then afterwards, the defensive backs secondary reworked, revamped, and rejuvenated.
Yeah.
Healthier unit talking today. Birm, can BIA get back to the standard?
I think they can. I'm really optimistic about this group as far as where they're heading. Number one, just because they have healthy depth, which they didn't have at all last year. And number two, there are key pieces that aren't back yet, like Lathan Ransom and Josh Proctor working his way back, and Cam Brown not always going 100% in practice. And I think that's more of like a pitch count type of deal for him at this point.
He doesn't love it.
I wouldn't love it either, because if you're a competitor, you want to be out here and go full go, but there's no point in going crazy right now when the goal for Cam Brown is to make sure he's on the field on September 2nd against Notre Dame. So, ultimately I think, and this will be a story over the next couple of years, but that group of corners with Denzel Burke, Jordan Hancock, and J.K. Johnson, that trio has a chance to be really special. And I think that their success this year will tell the story ultimately of the Ohio State defense. Not the safeties, I think it's the corners.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Berm, because you've got Denzel Burke. You've already got Denzel Burke, who's proven himself to an extent. I think he still has a lot of things he can get better at, and he'll tell you that. But those other two guys are going to be the deciding factor in the future of what makes this secondary great. But in the near term, you've got Cameron Brown. You've got those safeties who can help, alleviate some of those growing pains that Jordan Hancock and Ja'Kalen Johnson will be going through. I don't think there's any question that there will be a couple moments here or there. But when you have safety play like Ohio State can have with Tanner McCalister, with Josh Proctor eventually, with Cameron Martinez, Lathan Ransom, like Ronnie Hickman, all of those guys, your corner play, it almost makes your job a little easier as corners, not to mention the defensive line that's starting to come along. But those corners, they're going to have a lot of help in that secondary, and they're going to be able to just continue to get better and continue to progress and learn from Cameron Brown and learn from those safeties. And eventually, by November, I think you could see, a top-of-the-line defensive backfield with those corners if they continue to progress.
Yeah, what stood out to me, too, is talking to several of these guys. They think what's really going to help them, it's interesting because they're learning defense, is how well the defensive line is going to play, they think, this year, how much more effective it's going to be, which actually helps their jobs. But, of course, my favorite guy to talk to today was who?
Josh Proctor.
Josh Proctor. He's been one of my favorite players since he showed up. We haven't seen him just really light it up just for a few plays, but not for a whole season and stuff. He's feeling very confident about his comeback situation. As he said, Stewie's brought him along. The trainer has brought him along extremely well. And, man, he's so much of a bigger player, too, physically, than he was 3 years ago. I'm just curious on what kind of season he's going to have if indeed he gets back and stays healthy.
I think beyond the physical development, which is obviously going to occur the longer you stay at Ohio State, the maturation process is significant for him. And just when he's walking off the field, he couldn't stop smiling. And I don't want to make this into some touchy-feely thing, but he went through some difficult stretches outside of just being healthy and the major injury setback, and nothing had gone really the way he envisioned his career going. He didn't think he was going to be here for one at this point in time, but just getting on the field, finding that consistency, learning everything that is to be a college student. And there weren't a lot of those huge smiles. Like, I think back to being in a gym in Tulsa, Oklahoma, meeting him the first time, and this kid was exuberant. And you could tell that the way he played was partly because of how comfortable and happy, we talked about that on Wednesday, the player is. And the fact that he's had a full week now to sort of be out there and not do every team drill, but not have any sort of limitations on himself physically, you can tell how much that means to him and resonates. And if you get that version of Josh Proctor back, which again, once you removed him from the equation in week 2, Ohio State wasn't going to maybe be perfect no matter what last year. There were other issues underlying it, but he was the linchpin that they were building everything else around in the secondary. And once that was gone, then that house of cards fell apart completely. Now you're building a new house, but Josh Proctor is going to play such a key role in that, along with Ronnie Hickman and Tanner McCalister. He's an NFL player.
Yeah, I think
that's pretty significant.
Proctor will be a pillar in that new house, I do believe. I think it'll finally.
And I know that people watching get annoyed when we go back to last year and make excuses, but when you don't have Proctor, when you don't have a healthy Cam Brown, when you don't have a healthy Seven Banks, things changed so quickly last year, and there was not the depth behind it to fix it. And I think that for me, that's the takeaway, is that this year, when we watched this week, as a guy who started 12 games last year, Bryson Shaw, transferred out because he's not going to be able to get on the field here as long as these guys are healthy, because there's depth and there's talent. And we watched Legend Cavazos leave because of those 3 sophomore cornerbacks that I mentioned earlier. Like, this is a group that has a much different mentality this year. And both Cam Brown and Jordan Hancock told me that it was about just stopping themselves from thinking about the end goal, like, and focus on today, get better tomorrow, get better the day after that. And I think that, I think we both here, and we've talked about it, I think we all expect that there's probably still going to be more attrition from that safety room, because we talked to 6 different safeties today, and we didn't even talk to Court Williams because he was running behind. So, like, there's 7, 8 guys that are going to play, and then you add Sonny Styles to the mix in September. How do you get these guys on the field, and how do you keep them happy? And really, last point I wanted to pivot to is with Josh Proctor. We watched him on Saturday at Student Appreciation Day. He was just standing back. He was 40 yards behind the defense and just watching things, because that's what he's going to be doing in that role. He doesn't need to be out here running all the drills. Josh Proctor's played a lot of football.
Yep.
He needs to see the field the way that Jim Knowles wants him to see it. So that's why it's important for him, and Court Williams especially, I think, to really just be viewing things.
That secondary is interesting to me in a sense of last year versus this year, because last year, once Josh Proctor goes down in the secondary especially, there's almost a leadership void. Cameron Brown was here for a while, but he wasn't as proven as you want, like, one of your leaders in the secondary to be. Your 2 leaders really were on the defensive line, Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison. And when your leaders aren't
Haskell Garrett,
when you're not producing at a high, really, really high level, it becomes a little difficult as the season wears on to really resonate. That secondary is full of proven guys now. Tanner McCalister is a proven guy who knows this defense. Josh Proctor, everyone knows what he can do, and the fact that he's been here for so long, I think he carries a little bit of weight in the leadership aspect. Cameron Brown is now a proven leader. He's done it before. He literally fought somebody in that Michigan game. He knows.
Fought 3 people.
Yeah, exactly. He knows,
could have used some backup.
He knows how to lead.
Cavalry.
So I think that's the biggest thing is last year you had, and no offense to any of those guys who were playing last year, but Bryson Shaw had to step up and be one of the leaders of the secondary without being a proven guy. And that's just the biggest difference to me. As you look out there when we're talking to 6 different guys today, and they all have 11, 12 games under their belt. They all know exactly what they need to be doing to get better. And that leadership is going to carry on to the field.
Yeah, and Tanner McCalister was talking about how the other guys on this defense are getting it. They're getting this new Jim Knowles approach, which bodes well. I mean, especially from a safety standpoint of how integral they are to this thing. It's crazy. And then, it's funny because I was just envisioning, like, Brendan White was the defensive MVP of the Rose Bowl. The next year, he almost didn't play. Yeah. Yeah. No, well, it was a year after that. I think he ended up going to Rutgers. But he almost didn't play. And it's like we were talking about this before we did our podcast the other day, is it how this kind of mirrors a lot of ways, 2018 to 2019, 2021 to 2022 is looking very similar, because this defense I truly believe can be so much better based on what I'm seeing, based on what you're hearing. It's the spring. They're not really even playing true football yet, but I think it bodes well for this defense.
To me, it reminds me of 2016, and we know what the results were for that group and the return touchdowns and the draft success they had after that. But when you went into it, you could have stood here in spring and you said, well, Marshawn Lattimore, boy, if he's healthy, he can do something that's going to be really special. And Malik Hooker, he's had some bad luck. If he comes out, he's an NFL safety. And it was almost as easy as putting those 2 guys out there. And then you had Denzel Ward and the pieces, Garyon Conley going around them. And it was the stuff that was on the rise, and you could see it bubbling. And obviously, they still had to go out and perform once it got there. But in spring, you could say the pieces are here, the potential is there, and will that translate? And there was a new system. There was some excitement about that, and putting them in different positions and letting them thrive, and it worked. And there's no guarantee as we stand here in the middle of April that that's going to happen. Cameron Brown is going to have to actually stay healthy. Josh Proctor is going to have to go back and learn a new system and prove that he can play at that level at consistently and take that maturity and grow with it. And Ronnie Hickman's going to have to find that next level as a second-year player. All these things are true, that we don't have to just stand here and say they are a finished product, but I think the potential and the ceiling for this unit is at the level from that first group that got to actually say, this is what BIA is, and they are the ones that developed that moniker and then proved it. I think that this group can get back to that standard, but it doesn't mean that they're done right now, because you still have 2 new position coaches and a new defensive coordinator and uncertainty about just the health. And Jordan Hancock hasn't actually gone out there and played corner in a big-time game yet. J.K. Johnson hasn't done that yet. He was playing at 167 pounds as a true freshman. That's probably not a secret why he got hurt. All these things still have to develop over time.
I think that sometimes the best barometer you need is to watch what is happening in the building. And when you see Legend Cavazos, for example, is a guy that's transferred out this week. He was playing on the outside at corner and then realized, okay, maybe my spot isn't there because there's these other guys ascending. Let me try play slot corner, the slot safety, where Tanner McCalister and Cam Martinez is, and then all of a sudden it's crap, I can't get ahead of those guys either. And when NFL caliber athletes are getting it, the switch happens very quickly. And right now, the guys that are leaving the program, I think, are the best indicator that something is going right with the guys that are in front of them. And that, I know that's sort of a backwards way to look at it. But
I agree with you 100%.
That to me is the sign that, hey, there's a change happening, because otherwise I think you'd see players say, hey, you know what, these guys aren't really getting it either. They're not ahead of me. They're not moving, and right now there's a clear delineation.
I think the other thing that I'm really starting to pick up on is Ryan Day. In the last 2 years, press conferences in the spring, I've asked him, you always talk about second-year players needing to step up. It's kind of my annual question to ask him. Do you see the second-year guys taking that step? Well, let's look back to the 2019 recruiting class was a really small class. The 2020 class was so offense-heavy that, the defensive stars in that class had to really start to develop instead of just, being 5-star guys. The 2021 class was absolutely loaded with defensive talent. And so the 2021 class is taking that second-year leap. And the guys who were supposed to be developmental guys in the 19 and 20 class are developing. And then they add Tanner McCalister as a transfer to come in and help alleviate a little bit of that learning curve. And you're starting to see all of those pieces come together, where in the last 2 years, you didn't really have a second-year leap from a lot of guys. You're having that this year, and it's adding not only talent and 5-star prospects to becoming 5-star players, but the depth around it is getting better. And that's the thing that I think I'm noticing the most, along with that switch coming on in this defense and how it's progressing right now.
I think what stands out about this defense, like we talked with Tanner McCalister and some of the other guys that we've gotten to talk to during the spring, is how much more they're going to affect the quarterback, both from a physical standpoint and from a mental standpoint. I mean, you sense that these guys are really excited about what they're practicing, about what they're learning and where it's going to go. And, if you stood back there like the other day during Student Appreciation Day, and they didn't always make the play, but just the stuff that was going on, and that's just maybe the tip of the iceberg of what's going to be coming in the fall that a quarterback has to deal with instantaneously before and after during a play. It's crazy to me where this can go. With that said, the thing I like about this defensive secondary, though, like you touched on, when guys are leaving who we thought were pretty talented, some of whom even started, it is a tip. But I really think, as I look at it, and this isn't hyperbole, Denzel Burke and Josh Proctor are elite, in my opinion. I know we haven't got to see Josh Proctor play yet, but they are among the elite players in this country if both of them stay healthy. I think a couple of these other guys could be, Ronnie Hickman could be that guy also, and maybe Cam Brown. We haven't seen Cam Brown just have that full year, and like you talking about, this is just another year where a lot of guys learned a lot of lessons last year. Jalen Johnson talking about breaking his shoulder just when he got to play, fractured shoulder, he's out. He's fired up about getting out there and making some plays, and you can sense the excitement.
To me, this feels, again, we get hyperbolic and people get annoyed with it, but whatever, that's what we're paid to do, right? To talk about this team. To me, this feels a lot like 2014 in a way, like that 2013 recruiting class.
16 and 14.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
We talk a lot about the super sophomores around Ohio State and the 1968 champions, and then the 2014 team was buoyed by sophomores. Ezekiel Elliott, Joey Bosa, JT Barrett. I mean, it was a team that it was like, hey, now these guys got a chance, and they took it and ran. And I do think that 2021 class, that was Ryan Day's like pinnacle right now of his recruiting efforts. He had 7 5-star kids in that class. They're all getting their moment to shine, and I just feel like there's a special feeling brewing around here. And now, again, you got to prove it. You got to stay healthy. You got to have a lot of things bounce your way. But the attitude and the perspective is a lot different than it was a year ago. And if the first thing that happens today, we sit down and the first guy says, "Hey, you need a haircut."
I can't believe Cam told you to get your hair cut.
It's unbelievable.
You didn't even want to say his name because you were so hurt.
I was annoyed. I'm like, "Look at your hair, Cam." I'm like, "Come on. I know I need a haircut." Cameron Martinez, thanks you for pointing it out. I'll have one by Monday.
I don't think you'll wait that long. If Cameron Martinez told you to get a
Son
haircut,
of a gun.
you're not even going to leave Columbus before your hair's cut.
Unbelievable. Thanks for nothing, Cam.
Was it amazing how little we talked about Bryson Shaw in those 3 weeks before he ended up leaving?
No?
I mean, I know. I mean, you know what I meant. I meant that rhetorically. It's just there is a sense of a total different situation going on, and that was a tip of the iceberg. Is that Jim Knowles wants playmakers on the field. I mean, he wants guys that are getting to the ball in a bad attitude and making plays. I know it's a cliche, but it's interesting how it's bubbling here.
It is bubbling.
Percolating.
It's percolating.
It's percolating, yeah.
And there's another week of it still to go. A spring practice, not over yet, but winding down. Spring game a week from tomorrow in the Horseshoe. You won't want to miss it. Spencer Holbrook, Tim May, Jeremy Birmingham, and myself, Austin Ward. We will be there, and we'll have a couple more practice reports coming your way. They're brought to you by Byers Auto, and we have full coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes all year at lettermenrow.com.